If you didn't already know, the jab is the most important punch in boxing. But what actually makes a good jab? Well, there's plenty of advice going around on the intricacies of what makes a good jab. But to really find the fundamental truth, I put on YouTube, found Larry Holmes and slowed his jabbing technique down to like a quarter speed and really analysed his kinetic chain. And that's what I'm going to teach you in this video. As you saw from that clip, the jab has the ability to knock people down or maybe even knock people out. And this is what's referred to as the power jab. But the power jab is a bit of a misconception. People think that you need to use tension in their arms to really get power into a jab. And I'm going to explain basically what people are doing wrong before I explain how Larry Holmes was doing it correctly. So I need to imagine that you're doing a bench press. And when you do a bench press, you're exerting force on a load using the tension in your arms and tension in your chest and your shoulders. And as you press the weight, your arms aren't moving quickly because they're tense. And your arms can't move quickly when they're tense. Like literally just experiment with it yourself. Like extend your arm whilst it's tense. It's actually near like impossible, right? If you're tensing your bicep, right? Your bicep's pulling your arm towards your body. It's not pushing it away. Obviously your tricep is, but if all your arm is tense like this, you can't snap out that punch, right? And that's the difference alongside the rest of the kinetic chain, which I'll explain now. So the kinetic chain, when you're throwing a jab, is, if you look at my stance, my hips are at this angle, right? Which means that they have a little bit of leverage this way, and even more so if I rotate them a little bit this way, which is what Larry Holmes was doing. He was starting from a more square on position and using his hips going first, he'd push his rear hip backwards like this. And this little motion here causes a stretch between your right hip and your lead shoulder. This is called a cross-body chains, that's it. When this stretch is created here, there's a cross-body chain going from here to here, and it's stretched. And that stretch causes elasticity. Now, elasticity isn't really used in like a bench press, right? Because you're moving the weight slowly, and elasticity happens super quick. So in this little stretch of the hip going backwards, and then the upper body being stretched across here, there's like a little bit of an elastic explosion, if you will. It's trying to catch up to where the hip's going. So the hip will go first, that stretch will be made, and then your upper body will follow. When the upper body follows, there's another stretch made across the top of your chest into your shoulder where your arm is going to follow. So your hip will go first, your upper body will try catch, and your arm will try catch your upper body. Okay, and this is the chain that's happening when Larry Holmes flicks out his jabs, right? He pushes back with a hip, and then that stretch is made, the upper body catches up with that, and then the arm catches up with that. Now, the last piece of the puzzle, so it's not the last piece, but the next piece of the puzzle is where your arm starts to move, okay? So your upper body's gone, now your arm's got to catch up. And the only way your arm's going to catch up properly, like quickly, to be able to move your arm quickly is having that relaxation in your arm.
You don't punch with a jab, you slap them with a jab. If I tighten up, it won't be as quick. So I keep it loose, and I hit you from loose, and when I come out, I turn here, and I catch you with the knuckle part. That's the part that hurts.
So as you come back this way, your arm is going to try and catch up with your upper body, and it's going to shoot forward like that. All right, what I'm not doing whilst I rotate back this way is tensing my arm up like I'm going to press something. It's completely relaxed so that it fires off that elasticity that's created in that stretch, okay? And then when it fires forward much quickly than if I was to push the punch out, okay? So hip goes, upper body tries to catch up, arm tries to catch up to that, and that results in your body going through gears, okay? Now imagine you've got gears on a bike, and the first gear is super easy to turn but it doesn't really generate much force. It doesn't put much force on the back wheel to make you go faster. That's basically like your hip. Your hip doesn't take any effort to really move, but it doesn't really do much. It just sets off the next gear, which is your upper body. Okay, so your hip will go, then your upper body will try catch. Your upper body's the next gear, and that is accelerating the third gear, which is your arm. Okay, so it's there, next gear, and then there's one more, and that one is the turning over of your wrist at the end. Okay, so it's like a chain. We've got first gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear, and the fourth gear produces the most amount of force into your opponent, but it also takes the most amount of force to start, which you've got from first gear, second gear, third gear, and the fourth gear. Now, I'll explain the fourth gear because this one's super important. I want you to imagine someone pitching a baseball, and if you really slow it down, watch it in slow motion, you'll see that their arm, like basically, it looks like it pretty much dislocates, right? They put that much force, the elbow comes forward like this, and then their hand is playing catch up, and it sort of turns over like this. When it turns over, that extra whip is put into the punch, right, or into the baseball, which is exactly the same with the jab. As I'm turning it over, hip, upper body, arm, and then turn it over like this, that's that final little bit of elasticity which really carries forward that power that originally came from your hips. Okay, so it was like a chain, there, and then turning over right at the end. So how does Larry Holmes use this kinetic chain to throw his jab? Or he uses it off a bouncing rhythm as he moves around. I'll overlay some clips as I'm speaking through it. He's like bouncing around the ring, and on each of these bounces, he puts pressure into the ground. All right, so he exerts force on the ground, and that's Newton's third law. As soon as you push into the ground, you get a force come back up into your legs, and that force you can use to turn the first gear. Okay, so imagine you're actually, it's an in-depth analogy. We'll go with it. So imagine you're turning your car on. Pushing into the ground is like turning the ignition on. And then first gear is your hips, and then your body's coming off this. Okay, so it should look like this. If you slow that down, you see my hips are going, then my upper body's going, then my arm's going, and then I'm turning over my knuckles. Now there's a lot of importance as well of turning over your knuckles, because you know we talked about the baseball pitch as like your arms catching up with your elbow because the stretch is coming through here. Well, turning that when they pitch, right, and they're following through, it's this motion. It's like an arcing motion. Exactly the same when you're jabbing. You're like turning over, and that's what's accelerating your knuckles round. That's what gives that final whip. So you need to make sure that you're turning your knuckles over like this. So your palm will start facing this way, and as you extend, coming through here, you're whipping your arm over like that. You can basically just use that one little principle, that last gear, in any jab, right? You can just keep the rest of your body pretty still and just whip your hand over like this. But to get that extra power, the power jab, like we talked about at the start, you need to use your hips, you need to use your upper body to really be able to fire out your jab and do a lot more damage. Turning your knuckles over at the end is also super important, because that's putting all of that power that you generated from the ground into your knuckles, in particular these three, because that's that power line. It's turning the knuckles over into the target, okay?
And when I come out, I turn here, and I catch you with the knuckle part. That's the part that hurts.
So following this kinetic chain, your jab will have a lot more power and be a lot quicker, and also a lot harder to see coming. I need to put my coat back on, bruv. Fucking freezing, bruv. I've actually spent this last week going through this tried and tested technique by Larry Holmes in one-to-one sessions with my Hybrid Warrior Elite students. If you were interested in being coached by yours truly, then you should join. The link's in the description, or go to hybridwarriorelite.com. All right, bye. Your jab is sick.